Chair Reed. Okay, it's yours.
Oh, I was waiting for the little announcement. Good morning, everybody. This is, we've had an action-packed fiscal year, so this is our last meeting of fiscal year 2024. And we've, as we all know, our subcommittees have been dealing with some issues that we're finally, as a full board, going to take a look at it again today. And we, I think before the public comments, we want to say a farewell to Bettina. I don't know if she's on today.
No, she couldn't be here today, but she may be able to be at the meeting in July. Okay.
Oh, that'd be great. You know, when we just try to think of how long Bettina's been with us, forever, and has done amazing things, including, I just wrote this down, she helped design our Green Liberty bonds, which includes the ability for retail investors to buy bonds alongside institutional investors. And if anybody wants to attend, I know I signed up for it. There's a goodbye, an official goodbye on July 11th from 5 to 7:30 at the Pond House in West Hartford. And if you want to go for Bettina's party, please let Brian know, and we'll make that happen. And we also want to welcome Kim Morris, who's joining us, and we're very excited that she's with us, and she's already jumping in. I can say she's going to be fun, and we like fun. We like smart and fun. This is a good combination. So welcome. We really look forward to working with you.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's see. I should say, let's officially call the meeting to order. It's 9:03 a.m. on Friday, June 21st, 2024. And let's see, we have the consent agenda. So there are going to be, public comments. Do we have any public comments? And we have two items on the consent agenda, the meeting resolution. And did you want to talk about that?
Yes. So,
okay, Brian.
Thank you, Chair Reed. So we have two items on the consent agenda for requiring resolutions: the meeting minutes from our last meeting, and then 4 position descriptions. As you all know, it's customary for us to provide the director level and above position descriptions, and we have had, as you all have been introduced to over the last 6 to 12 months, a number of staff members who we would like to promote to the director level positions. So those are in the packet. So those two will require resolutions. And then we have provided additional information on the process for under $500,000 transactions and no more in aggregate than $1 million. This is specifically transactions for energy storage solutions. That Sergio and team and Sarah are going to be talking about a few transactions a little bit later in the agenda. We included our May through Q3 FY24 financial report, including some additional information there, which you might find interesting, and then our Q3 Inclusive Prosperity Capital report as well. But so those are resolutions 1 and 2 for the consent agenda.
Okay. Do we have any discussion or questions or?
I had a question. This is John Harity. So like the director of CPACE administration reports to Mackey, or replaces Mackey, or what does that do? What does
Well, let's talk after. I hope not.
I was going to say, Mackey, are you on?
Yeah. Yeah, not that I know. To my knowledge, it's going to be reported to me.
And who does the director of marketing and communications report to?
To me.
Who's me?
Eric Schrager.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay, that's cool. Thank you.
Any other questions, observations? Do I hear a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved. John Harity.
Do I hear a second?
Second, Hank Webster.
Thank you, Hank. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Madam
Okay.
Chair, I think I need to abstain from the meeting minutes as I was not present at the April 26th meeting. I don't
Okay.
know if I abstained from that one particular resolution. I'm sorry, I don't know how this process works.
Yeah, that's good. You're you're doing it. You're doing it great already,
Okay.
Kim. That's good.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay, so
Just
all in-
one point, maybe Brian Farnan can run this down because it comes up a lot. I think under Robert's rules, you don't have to abstain from the minutes only because you weren't there. You may want to anyway, but I do think under Robert's, people who aren't there can still vote on those. Maybe Brian, for future reference, if we ever need someone's vote, it would be good to know.
Yeah, I'll check in with Brian. He's out today, but I'll make note of that as a follow-up.
Well, so that's a great question. Does that resolution pass with one abstention?
It does.
I don't want to, okay,
Yeah,
Okay.
we've got Adrian and Dominic who have joined us as well. But thank
Okay.
you for asking.
sure.
okay. So all in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Aye.
Opposed? We have one abstention. Okay, good. Moving on. Oh, so these, we're dealing with some that have been prior approved by okayed and recommended to the full board by Budget Operations and Compensation. And say we're going to have Eric and Jane talk about targets and some of the things that that we discussed and got approved.
Cool. Thank you, Madam Chair. So I will start with targets and then we'll move into the budget. So yeah, we've had a good year so far this year. We're close to our targets and we're really excited for another year next year watching our programs go. We'll start with the financing programs. We're proposing on CPACE a target of 23 projects for $32 million in capital deployed, of which 14.7 will be Green Bank balance sheet money. We have some commitments here that you'll see to the right around where we're hoping to leverage some of the greenhouse gas reduction funds that are coming our way. In the columns highlighted in CIF, the National Clean Investment Funds, and then the Solar for All money. But those are subject to change. The real targets are what we've always proposed: the number of projects and capital deployed and capacity installed. Looking at our marketplace assistance program, we're aiming for 8 projects for $17 million of capital deployment, 11 of which will come from our balance sheet. That should be a total of 7.4 megawatts of installed capacity. That's totally based on our existing pipeline and what we think will come through and close next year. So non-MAP PPAs or leases, we have a target of 14 that we're currently working with outside developers on. That's $9 million worth of capital deployment, and of which we're expected to use our balance sheet for debt of 4.3 million. And then SBA, we're going to continue with the utilities. This is a number that comes from them that so 518 projects, 12.6 million in capital deployment, and we'll use $2.5 million of Green Bank capital to facilitate that. The other products on here, we have a new tariff-backed loan that's coming to market. We don't have a target against that as it's a new product. We need to gauge what would be going to that loan versus other products that we offer, such as CPACE and the PPA. And then we still do offer our multifamily term product, the Lime loan, and our pre-development loans, but we're not actively pushing them because we feel that the PPA and our other offerings are better suited in those sectors. Next slide. Moving on to incentive programs. Where our target is 500 projects for residential energy storage solutions, $16 million of capital deployment. That's 4.3 megawatts of nameplate that we're aiming to install there. Um, that's basically in line with the targets that Pura has set and what we need to achieve to advance those goals. On the commercial side, we have a smaller target of 5 projects, $12.5 million of capital deployment, 10 megawatts of nameplate capacity. That is a bit lower than we've done in previous years because Pura is taking a pause on the incentives for ESS while they look at incentive levels. We expect that pause to be done by the end of the calendar year and us to be back in market in January. It'll take a little while for people to, or developers to internalize whatever this new incentive levels are and start developing projects, but we think the 5 is achievable once this get announced. On the Smarty side, we're increasing our target year on year. This year was about 1,200 projects and change. We're increasing to 1,325. We're going from about $23 million of capital deployment to $26 million and 2 megawatts of capacity installed. Smarty is going to continue to grow. We think that the Inflation Reduction Act tax incentives will juice that market a little bit. We have hedged a little bit because our largest lender, Capital for Change, has been out of the program for 6 months. We've made great strides even without them, but that has left us some obstacles to navigate as we work to get them back into the program and as we work to grow it. So we're bullish, but not as bullish as we would like to be. Looking at environmental infrastructure, we have 3 lines on here. The first 2 are really referring to programs that are part of other business lines, but call out the subsector that we're expecting to be environmental infrastructure related measures. CPACE, it's on there. We don't have a target against it. It's something that we're measuring, we're monitoring, but we're not setting a goal on. And that's because we've just released the measures. Things are still getting finalized, and we need to see what uptake will be. On the Smarty side, we launched the measures about 6 months ago. We've had some decent uptake. I think we've done 2 projects, and I think there are another 4 in the pipeline. Our goal is for 20 for the year as we continue to build a contractor base. We've had a lot of interest in some of the new measures and others that are kind of on the periphery at the moment. So we're expecting growth there, but our target is 20 measures for $100,000 of capital deployment. And then finally, you'll see this capital solutions line, which this line, frankly, is contingent on your approval today of the expanded capital solutions RFP. As you may recall, our capital solutions RFP as it exists right now is us where we've said, hey, you come tell us where there's a market failure, where our money can really help address that. And we're looking to expand that to environmental infrastructure. So our goal is to get one project to cross the threshold there, $2 million of capital deployment, and using $1 million from the Green Bank's balance sheet. Next slide. So this is a little bit of a rejig of the way that we presented things in the past. I apologize and tried to color code it to my way to make my life easier. But so thank you for dealing with my Technicolor charts. Our investment budget, this really gets at other ways that we're leveraging our balance sheet and investing our funds really programmatically. So we have some commitments around resilience hubs. We have committed money from the National Clean Investment Funds, from the GGRF there. We're hoping to commit $2.5 million next year towards that. We are aiming to recapitalize, so basically sell projects that we've worked with developers on to develop PPAs. We have 8 projects we're looking to sell for $15.2 million. We'll insert our debt in there for $11 million of that. Transportation, we're hoping to get our first large-scale transportation investment done next year, $10 million. We have commitments from the NCIF of $10 million. So we're really hoping that we can facilitate this transformation of municipal bus fleet, school bus fleets from diesel to electric, especially in low-income communities with regard to the state targets on that. And then finally, or not finally, but we have two buckets on capital solutions. The first is clean energy related. So other things that come through the door, $16 million of capital deployment we're looking to do there. And then you'll see the final line I spoke about previously of capital solutions related to environmental infrastructure. So overall for our investments team, we're looking to do $45.9 million of capital deployment, committing $40 million from Greenbank's balance sheet next year. As far as the organization, so programs and a programmatic investment, our targets are 2,400 projects, $172.6 million of capital deployment, including $78 million from the Greenbank's balance sheet for an installed capacity of close to 24 megawatts. Any questions before I move on to budget?
So this is Lonnie, just to clarify. So, but you folks return to us or to the Budget Ops subcommittee initially as details become available and projects become formalized.
Yes. So
No, we're just saying go for it, but we're saying but come back with details as we move forward.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And I think there's a lot on here, especially on the investment side, where we'll get clarity as we go through the year. Like we say, capital solutions, a lot of that is we need to see what is currently in the pipeline is going to cross the threshold. What are we going to be able to get closed? When we have target or numbers on here regarding the two different buckets of money from the GGRF, I expect there to be movement between the two or some just from outside of that as we figure out terms and conditions with both of those awards and figuring out where those are applicable and or not so much. So we will continue to keep you up to date.
Any questions or observations, concerns?
Hi, this is John Harity. I just wanted to say that 2,400 projects at 172 million bucks is that's like significant. That's really having an impact, I think.
Yeah.
If we can do that in a year, that's really something.
Anybody else? Kim?
All right, with that, let's tell you, walk through the budget. So starting with revenues, we're, as an organization, looking at revenues for the year of $67.5 million. That's an increase year on year of $13.3 million. The big message, without walking through each bucket on here, the big message that we want to convey is that our public funding is flat. Our utility customer receipts from the Clean Energy Fund are decreasing year on year as they do every year. Reggie proceeds are capped, but our earned revenues are increasing, and this year is going to be our best year in terms of earned revenues. That's driven by interest income from investments that we did this year. So we said, hey, we're thinking big, we're going to add staff, we're going to invest more money, and now we're seeing the results of that. And so we're seeing an additional $1.4 million in terms of interest income year on year. And then in terms of grant income, obviously that's going from the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, but we also are receiving smaller grants from DECD that's going to help us on the C&I side, specifically manufacturing. So
maybe just one comment on the public revenues. I think it's important to just reinforce this. The fact that it's stagnant or declining over time is actually a good thing, because what it means is that we are helping consumers be more efficient with the utilization of energy despite a growing economy. So Deep is doing its job, Pure is doing its job, the CLNM administrators are doing their jobs, and the Connecticut Green Bank is doing its job to make sure that consumers are reducing consumption through, behind the meter renewables, energy efficiency, and the like. So naturally, that consumption level is going to go down over time, which means we get less clean energy fund from the system benefit fund because it's based on a mill rate. So now that number may go up in the future as we see more electric vehicles and heat pumps and potentially data centers come online, but it's a good trend to see that number come down. Just wanted to make that point.
Speechy. Next slide.
Can I ask, do you mind?
Sorry,
Go back
ahead.
to, I just, as a total newbie here, can you help me understand the 25% increase in the grants? You may have mentioned it, but you're using some acronyms that I'm not familiar with.
Certainly. So our grant funding to date has been fairly low. So that's a 25,000% increase year on year. We were awarded after a lengthy competition and even more lengthy preparation, 2 awards under the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, the GGRF. Under the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund that was part of the Inflation Reduction Act, there were 3 separate competitions. We were part of winning coalitions and all of those, but we're looking at the grants for 2 of those here. The Solar for All competition, where we partnered with Deep, CHAFA, and others in the state for an award of about $43 million. We have 6 years to invest those funds in cooperation with our partners, and then an additional close to $40 million through the Coalition for Green Capital, the organizing group, and for Green Bank based out of DC. And so while our awards were larger, what we're saying here from an accounting perspective is that 10 million is what we expect to actually disperse from that, because we only recognize that revenue when we actually disperse it on the other end. Matt?
Thank you and congratulations.
Thank you.
So my quick question is, leaving aside the utility income that Brian just explained, it looks like all our growth, though, is really either interest income a little bit and mostly the grant income. Is that troubling at all? Our programs, as you said, we've added staff, so I don't know if interest income is a broader category, but is there any other project related income?
So interest income is the primary source of income coming from our projects. So when we do a C-PACE loan, that's coming back to us in terms of interest and principal. So the fact that we're seeing that interest grow, it's not like interest of the money sitting in a bank account, it's interest that we've invested.
Projects. Okay.
So
that reflects project growth. That
totally.
Yeah.
Other project-related income can be seen in our LREC, ZREC income, which we did have a slight drop year on year of about $26,000, as well as in REC sales, which were down just due to the aging of our system and it being a little bit colder of a January. So, all right, next slide. So expenses, what are we going to spend this money on? First is compensation and benefits. We have a $3.2 million increase year on year. This is really while we do have 5 new positions in there, this is really a result of the positions that we added this year that have come online late in the year. So we had open headcount. I know that we came to the board with in January. It's taken us a while to fill those. We've had 2 of those growth positions start in the past 2 weeks. So while we budgeted for those for 6 months, the real expense is coming next year. So that's a big driver of that $3.2 million. Of the 5 new positions we're asking for, 3 are in the financing programs. We're looking for an additional member of the incentive programs team to help with the growth in ESS, and a new position helping us on contractor outreach, specifically on solar and storage. Um, in terms of program administration, we have a decrease of about $500,000. This is driven by the decreased use of Power Clerk for the RSIP program. As it is sunset, we don't need the software anymore, and we're looking to transition off of it by the end of the year. We've also made significant progress on wireless meter replacements, and we've had prior year investments to stand up the energy storage solutions program. So developing our Salesforce platform there, for example. Our program administration IPC fee is also decreasing by 33%, and that's in line with our long-term memo of understanding with IPC. Marketing, we have a forecast decrease of about $100,000. This is almost entirely due to a decrease in advertising and outreach linked to ESS. We have a goal of being more targeted, and we want to make sure that we're in line with Pura's expectations there. And so this spend and decreasing the spend is necessary for all that. So we're going to be more purposeful, and we're working with our marketing agency to do that. On EM&V, we have a decrease of $445,000. This is primarily due to decreased regulatory costs, decreased regulatory requests and support needed for energy storage solutions. We've been, in previous years, we've worked very closely with external consultants to meet some bespoke requests by Pura, looking at hyperlocal emissions and how do we target those areas and how do we identify what those areas are. We've needed outside facilitation there. Next slide. Perfect. Research and development, we're looking to increase by $102,000 and help spark new efforts in environmental infrastructure, looking to suss out if we can use carbon credits as a way for an additional revenue stream in terms of building electrification. And then how do we leverage artificial intelligence? And then we have some other efforts around community engagement. Consulting and professional fees, we have an increase of $147,000. This is driven by two primary expenses. The first is the need to do a compensation study. As you all are aware, we've had a recent period of inflation, but also wage inflation. And I feel like it's a good point to look at our salaries and make sure that we're benchmarking. We typically do this every 3 to 5 years. Our last one was done in 2021. That's why I'm kind of doing this on the earlier side of that 3 to 5 years is the wage inflation. So I want to make sure that we're staying competitive and being able to attract the talent that we need to continue to get money out the door. And the second is the strategic technology consultant. That will hopefully help us rein in some of our other IT spend. Bond issuance costs. At this point, we don't intend to issue another Shrek-backed municipal bond, so we haven't included anything. We're very cognizant of where rates are, so we will revisit this halfway through the year. If there is significant change in rates, we may look to issue. So don't be surprised if we come back with a change in this in January, but we're not budgeting anything right now. Grants and incentives. We've increased this to, we have a $9.1 million increase, 11% year on year for our existing programs, while non-operating expenses, including interest expense and a provision for loan loss, are projected to decrease year on year. So that 9.1 is due to just expected activity, as well as this new grant program that we're running in partnership with DECD that I mentioned before. We're effectively just a pass-through. Next, any questions on expenses?
Eric, I have a question. I don't know if it's here or when you get to the strategic partners. So I don't know if you're covering that.
I'll cover that.
Okay.
Okay. The staffing plan, I was referring to this for this kind of a breakdown our compensation. So looking at this, we have effectively 43 employees that started FY24 with us, 43.75 employees. Pretty much they're all still here. That's the way to read that. In terms of employees that have been hired for open positions, we hired 11 people this year. And then as of the time of doing the slide, we had 13 positions that were open, that are in the budget, but we haven't yet filled, including those 5 additional positions that I mentioned previously. What I want to highlight here for you is we are proposing a 1.5% promotion pool. This is in line with what we've done since I've been with the organization. A 3.5% COLA, which is based off of the Bureau of Labor Statistics wage inflation numbers year on year, April through April, and a 5% merit pool. This is in line with our internal or our compensation philosophy of being internally equitable and externally competitive. It's in line with the other quasi publics that we have engaged in the planning process. Questions here? All right, so next slide, strategic partners. Every year we come to you and say, hey, here are our big spend partners with whom we've done RFPs in the previous 3 years who are in compliance with our operating procedures. We get your blessing so that we can go ahead and start to engage in doing professional services agreements with them. The spend on this is higher year on year because we've, due to the tax flip on Solar Lease 2 and Solar Lease 3, the way we have been looking at the spend across the organization is kind of rolling up things, and this makes our life a lot easier in terms of tracking than to bring in the activities in our subsidiaries into this. So that's the big difference of why we're coming to you for approval of $10 million in contracts as opposed to $6.2 million. There are a couple on here I want to highlight for full transparency where there weren't RFPs done, and those are very specific reasons. One is Inclusive Prosperity Capital and our formation of them going back to 2018. The next is Carasoft, where we are piggybacking on the state's contract with them, that the state made the selection through a competitive bid process. So we're relying on their process, not our own. And then Source One, who was selected by the Department of Corrections to be their consultant and facilitator for a technical guide for the development of a fuel cell project there. So we're reliant on their procurement process with that. But we will be the ones that are holding the contract with them. So Matt, you had a question?
Yeah, I just had a couple quick ones. I'll just put them all out there on just entries. And yeah, it just seemed like a big increase as a percentage over 2024. And so my questions were, hold on, let me get back to my screen here. Well, of course. Oh, there it is. Okay, so just I'll tick through them. On Inclusive Prosperity, it seems like we're providing a lot less in terms of financial support. I assume that was part of my recollection was when we created them, there was sort of this transition period and we were stepping down, and that doesn't reflect a lack of activity or decrease in programmatically, but more as IPC stands on its own 2 feet, we were ramping down. That, I guess that's a question with a suggested answer. And then 2 was on CTEC Solar. It looks like they're a pretty big increase there. I was wondering if you could explain why such a big deal. And also, doesn't CTEC sometimes have projects before us? And if so, do we have to have some sort of ethical, like disclosure if they're our strategic partner and we're voting on projects of theirs? And then,
Oh, no, go ahead.
and then just on AEC Solar and DCF, those have gone from, I guess not to 1.4 million together. I looked through the memo. I just don't see anywhere that what they do. And maybe just, kind of it's a big increase. And then lastly, the two you mentioned, I think it was Carasoft and Source One, where we're relying on someone else's RFP. We've been dinged by the auditors in the past on this kind of RFP stuff. So are we simply taking them, for their RFP, or have we looked at it and do we need to do anything to kind of insulate ourselves from criticism from the auditors if the Department of Correction or whoever else, didn't run their RFP appropriately? That's it.
All right, let me start at the top there. So I'll answer the questions on CTEC first. So your question about projects coming before us versus what we're doing here are two totally separate things. One, they're acting as a developer, they're building new solar, we're engaging with them through CPACE or another program in that front, on that front. What they're doing for us here is unrelated to that. This is servicing systems that are owned by the Green Bay. So different side of the shop there.
Yeah, but is there an appearance of impropriety? Is there something we need to do if other vendors might think CTEC has, because they're a strategic partner, is getting preferential treatment? That was on different sides of the shop.
We can discuss internally. From my perspective, I don't think so, because we've projects that are coming to us, we're open to business. We're dealing with plenty of other developers and others in the space. We selected them for the servicing through multiple RFPs. So I would rely on all of that. I think it's pretty open and fair. And getting to the increase year on year and also the spend with AEC and DCS, we don't have anything in the FY24 budget because we didn't budget for those, because we were spending with them, but it was done actually at a subsidiary level. So the entity Solar Lease 2 or Cephia Holdings or Cephia Solar Services were actually holding those contracts and doing that spend. So it's not as big of an increase as it looks like.
Is there a reason we moved them to our balance sheet this year?
Primarily so that we could track it better, because while we didn't have we weren't budgeting for it at those entities, we were responsible from a bylaws and a governance perspective to make sure that everything was compliant with our procurement procedures. So tracking that was less than ideal.
Okay.
So it allows us to stay on top of it and not have to go back to Chair Reed so many times for amendments throughout the year.
Okay. That helps. Thanks.
And in terms of reliance on the competitive procurement processes, let me speak first to Carasoft. I'm very comfortable with the process that was done there. And this is something that I would say every state agency it has access to, and the majority are relying on, certainly the non-quasis, the direct agencies. The quasis are able to avail themselves of it. I'm happy to go pull it up and review it before we sign the deal this year, but we have been contracting with Carasoft under that agreement previously. Matthew, do you know anything about the Department of Corrections process on selection for Source One?
I don't know. No, I don't know anything about the process. I just know that they were under DOC contract to do an assessment. And so because they essentially did the technical work around the fuel cell by selection of DOC, they're best suited and DOC would like them to continue to see the work through to completion. We're stepping into the developer role there, at least for a small piece of time. And they requested that DOC requested that Source One stay in place as sort of an owner's rep for the construction portion of the project. I can find out what their selection process was, but I just know that they were under state contract previously.
Yeah, I really, I don't really so
Yeah,
much.
okay,
I guess I just don't want to have us, because it says no RFP on the chart here. I just want to make sure that we look ahead if we ever have to explain why I assume we're paying them directly.
Although we are charging, essentially it's a pass through. DOC requested and they want the oversight. We're charging a development fee when we sell that project to recoup the cost, but it doesn't, the auditors won't care about that because it's our money. So that's a good
Those
point.
are the auditors. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Those are my questions.
Other
I,
questions?
Eric, I had a sort of a question or comment on this preferential treatment for the strategic partners thing. Is that, I thought that was the point, was that, we've formed these partnerships because these are organizations that do good work, have proven themselves to be really reliable and trustworthy, and so we've entered into an agreement with them that is, is tighter than with just anybody that comes along. So, in a sense, it is preferential treatment based on the relationship, right? Isn't that the whole deal?
I wouldn't necessarily call it preferential treatment. I would say that we've selected them to provide a core service to the organization through a competitive process. They may come before us in other capacities through which they're not getting any preferential treatment, but certainly the fact that they're on this list means that we've sussed them out and we're comfortable with the quality that of the service that they're being asked to provide.
Yeah.
My
I guess
question
yeah.
was maybe inartful. I guess what I'm trying to say, to put a fine point on, is do we need to disclose when we're voting on a CTEC project that they're a strategic partner, just like as board members, if we had a client, we would disclose that. It's more the conflict of interest, appearance of impropriety on the voting on their projects than the fact that we engage them.
I'm happy if we want to do that going forward, we can take that as a follow-up and make sure that we do that. I think this kind of gets back to the name strategic partners, and it's not as aptly named. These are pretty much just large vendors that we're dealing with. But
Yeah, I did one other thing to point out. When they would bring us a project for financing, it's acting like in the case of CPACE, we're presenting the borrower to you for approval. And we've got, regardless of who the contractor is, we've got a set of underwriting standards and technical standards that we would apply to that project. And, they either meet it or they don't, regardless of who the contractor is. But it's a good point. We could flag that going forward. Where I don't think there is a conflict of interest, but there is at least a perceived one, which I hadn't thought of. We just need to continue to be careful of, is on the solar map program, where we actually run procurements and select contractors to build projects that we've sourced. CTEC often does compete in those. We do, we've got a rigorous process to vet projects, or to vet proposals and score them. You're right that some people, if we do happen to pick CTEC, which we have picked them for one project in our third state portfolio, some people might roll their eyes and say, "Oh, the Green Bank." You make the point you're making. So I just think we need to make sure we have defensible selection processes for those RFPs, which we do. We've been FOIA'd on them. We've disclosed everything. So I think we're covered there. We just need to continue to maintain our rigorousness there.
Can I ask something?
Is that Kim? Go
That's
ahead,
me,
Kim.
Kim
Go.
Morse. There was a question asked on the IPC amount the reduction, significant reduction,
Yes.
and then a suggested answer, and I'm not sure that there was confirmation that the suggested answer was correct.
The
So I
suggested-
just want, I want to
Yes.
understand that better.
It is correct.
Okay,
In the memo of understanding with IPC, we have agreed to phase out of our support with them. So over the last couple of years of the contract. So we went from 100% down to 75% this year. And then next year we're due to drop to 25% and then nothing as we phase that out.
okay, thank you.
Eric, just a comment on that is, this is John, that for people that went through that whole process, it's an amazing outcome. That was a real, kind of like a roll of the dice at the time when we were totally under the gun because of the legislature's sweep. And that, it has really worked out well. So, and that was not a given when it took off. Yeah. So that's just like a real success story.
Well, and this is Lonnie. I mean, and they've been incredibly valuable in underserved communities, whole areas that have been neglected. So they've been amazing. And those are national priorities now. So we kind of established that early on.
There you go. Just continuing all the compliments there on IPC. They were also among the biggest winners of the Solar for All competition nationally. I think they won $246 million. So they're taking the model and the focus on low income and disadvantaged communities across the country. So just a big kudos to them. And it really originated from the Kresge Foundation, the Connecticut Green Bank, and DEEP co-creating them back in, as Eric noted, 2019.
Cool. Any other questions or concerns? All right, with that, I present you resolution number 3.
Do I hear a motion to approve resolution number 3?
So moved.
I make the motion, and I would just note that the subcommittee approved this unanimously as well.
And then Matt,
I'll
is that
second.
you seconding? Okay.
Yes, please.
Any more questions or? All right. What? Did I hear somebody? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? Okay. Moving on.
All right. Why don't I set some context, Madam Chair? I know Brian Farnan is out this morning, but I think he would like me to say and introduce James, who's going to provide an overview of the legislative session. That what you see in your packet, what James is going to deliver today, and all the time and effort that he's spent over the last year has just been incredible. So we're going to have James walk us through how the 2024 session occurred in review. Turns to you, James.
All right, thanks, Brian. Good morning, everyone. James Santos, Legislative Liaison. I'm just going to walk you through this very briefly. I know this is a large agenda, but in your packets, you have received the 2024 legislative summary, which goes into excruciating detail on legislation under the headings of clean energy, infrastructure, quasi impacts in general, which sometimes pertain to any sort of labor bills or workforce competitiveness or permitting issues that would come up. So I would encourage you to please read through that and reach out to me. I'll make myself available at any time to walk you through the details of any of the legislation, who was behind it, what happened. And basically from this session, I could explain how all the bills have been watered down to studies and task force. But so by the numbers, 174 public acts were passed by the General Assembly. 172 were signed by Governor Lamont into law, and only 2 were vetoed. He finished his signatures and vetoes a little over a week ago. So that's when we finalize the legislative summary. So it's factual, up to date, and then distribute. So where we started, when the session started, it's a short session. It's also an election year, right? So the goal is to not make that many waves in the legislation that's passed. But there were 742 bills that did receive a public hearing at the beginning of the session. 328 of those, a lot of them were consolidated, did pass out of committee as a JF and start working through the process. From the beginning, the Green Bank was from beginning to the end, I'd say the Green Bank was involved through the public hearing, negotiation, tracking of probably about 80 pieces of legislation. Next slide. So these were the two. I put the aircraft carrier up in the corner. Chair Reed, I know you get a kick out of that, but this is this is basically one bill came out of the House, one bill came out of the Senate dealing with clean energy specifically. The first bill was Representative Steinberg's omnibus bill. It is a consolidation of probably 3 or 4 bills, all thrown into one. I'll walk through very quickly the section so we could all understand exactly what the bill does. So the Uniform Capacity Tax, that's the acronym UCT. That was, well, what's interesting about that is OPM actually did a study on that last year. This year they had language which would have exempted all solar projects under 2 megawatts and then created a uniform capacity tax for projects over 2 megawatts at $8,000 per megawatt. That did not pass. That was watered down again to a study, which is to be conducted by OPM and DEEP. PURA is also required to do a study and report back by January 1 of 2026 on all tariff programs that are existing in the state of Connecticut, and most importantly, to make recommendations on successor programs. So that'll be interesting to see what's in that report in January of 2026. The simplified process for municipal solar canopy deployment, that was originally in this bill, it was a shall. Every municipality shall create a streamlined process. A bill that you'll see on the next page actually changed everything to may, so it's to be seen what is actually done on that. But it does require solar canopy projects to be approved within 6 months. Requires DEEP to include solar siting in the next IRP. And then the last piece is the NRES SCEF expansion. What it does is it extends the SCEF program to 2027 in line with the NRES program, as the SCEF program was set to expire in 2025. What it also does is it allows PURA to exceed the megawatt cap as long as they stay under the previous year's aggregate dollar amount. So that may lead to some additional projects to be a part of that. I wanted to highlight what was specifically in here for the Green Bank. We went through the legislative process on this before session. We were approached by CBIA. They wanted to create a SIR exemption for, pull this out. They wanted to eliminate alterations to buildings from the SIR, which basically would have applied to rooftops. The language that came out of the Energy and Technology Committee in the first go around looked absolutely nothing like CBIA proposed. CBIA tried to get it changed, repeated attempts, never happened. So they kind of lost focus on it. But ultimately, we expect the provision to have little to no expected increase in CPACE projects. It is for expansions to or upgrades to existing renewable energy systems only. So the CPACE team will be proposing guidelines later on this year for board approval. The last piece is the REFA, which is the Renewable Energy and Efficient Finance Account. It was canceled in 2016, but we were still required to report on that annually. I was in charge of making sure it was filed, so I wanted to make sure that was eliminated as soon as possible, as it was unnecessary. We will file this year as the last time that we submit our reporting to the legislature, just to make sure we're in compliance. The Senate Bill 385 this is Senator Needleman's bill. This has eight sections total. Again, it's probably 3 or 4, maybe 5 bills, sections pulled from each one. The first one, which is very important, and a little shout out to Mariana, who did a fantastic job on the hydropower task force. They had 4 recommendations. Ultimately, one of them was able to get through as part of this bill, which authorizes DEEP to solicit 40 megawatts of run-of-the-river hydropower for 20-year terms. That's a fantastic opportunity for the Green Bank to be a part and to finance those projects. I expect fully that the hydropower task force will be meeting informally this fall to meet with the chairs to develop and craft the 3 remaining recommendations that the hydropower task force recommended. Also, the little congrats to Stephanie, who has been appointed to the Solar Consumer Protection Task Force. That Brian Garcia and Sergio made that appointment. That is going to be starting off in August. And the last one, you probably read about this in the press. This is when Eversource announced that they were going to pause the EV charging rebate program. Senator Needleman was not happy with that, and his response was to introduce language that would allow Pura to select the Green Bank, DEEP, existing EDCs, or any third party to administer programs that the EDCs did not want to continue with. So that was in response to what you've probably read in the press. Next slide. So this was the big bond bill. There's a lot in here. This is probably the largest bill of the session. But the two pieces that are very important in this one that pertain to the Green Bank is Pura. So originally in the Energy and Technology Committee, the governor had a bill, House Bill 5052, which was school construction and renewable energy expansion in schools, green schools, zero carbon schools. Elements of that bill were rolled into this bill, sections 173 to 176. And importantly, it asked Pura to open a docket to establish a separate tariff for a 25 megawatt expansion. So that's in addition to the existing 100 megawatt that's on the books now. And they're expected to have this back by January of 2025, which means this will be legislation in 2025, which starts in January. The other is it requires all schools to do a solar feasibility study before a project is eligible for priority school district funding through DAS. The next bill is the origination of this is from Representative Foster. She has a solar project in her town, which has a very long history of noise, and it's a very detailed story. I could go on forever about how we got here. But it also deals with the transmission upgrades in Fairfield County along the shoreline as well. But what it does is this, when I say council, it's the Connecticut State Siting Council shall evaluate potential noise levels in order to grant a certificate. What that level is to be determined. Connecticut General Statute leaves it up to, I believe, the DEEP Commissioner to promulgate regs on that. Perhaps Hank may want to chime in there if he has any update on that. But clearly what it does say is no inverter transformer within 200 feet of a property line to try to minimize the impact. They want to try to see the inverters and transformers and any noise part of a solar array to be centralized or as far back from residential property as possible. The other piece is any material change to any configuration after the initial application, which happens all the time. They're required to notify the siting council and each abutter on record, which is a very reasonable ask. And the next slide. So environmental infrastructure. This bill, which is the bond bill I just talked about on the other page pertaining to clean energy, but it's so big that it also pertains to infrastructure as well. So this is basically a DEEP bonding wish list. DEEP did very well in this bill. $10 million for solid waste reduction in bonding. That goes to fund municipal food scrap diversion pilot programs in municipalities. Existing bonding of $125 million for loans and grants to retrofit multifamily housing. 25 million heat pump rebates at point of sale, and then the establishment of a new climate resiliency revolving loan fund for municipalities and private entities at $10 million. And the last bill is an act concerning the use of PFAS in certain products. So go into detail on this one, but what it does is it regulates the sale and use of certain products containing PFAS. 12 products are listed. It's anything from apparel to carpentry, carpets, to cosmetics to ski wax. It bans any solid, biosolid from domestic sewage or water treatment as a soil amendment beginning this October. And then has a phase out and then a ban 2026 and 2028.
Just a real quick point, James, on the first act there with the commissioner's already reached out to us. She's been great. We had a call last Friday with her senior team, including Mr. Hank Webster on the call here, Deputy Commissioner Semino, and Deputy Joe, the Deputy Commissioner of Energy, where she wanted to make sure that we knew about the programs and had a willingness and a desire to cooperate on how to deploy these resources. So just wanted to add that point.
So to wrap up, I wanted to do this as quickly as possible. Sorry if I rambled or went too fast, but I was given a 5-minute time slot here, so I want to just roll through as quickly as
You're
possible.
picking 15. But go ahead.
So the legislative report out went to everyone. I went to the board of directors. You have it in your packet. It went to all staff. We're doing a legislative lunch and learn next week. There is a process that we're going to be instituting immediately as part of the legislative process document passed last year, which is outreach to senior staff and staff at the Green Bank and going through the process to create our proposals for next year. And then I will say that there are some outstanding issues from last year, which will be debated in this upcoming session. There is the uniform capacity tax piece, which is the BASA solar tax issue. The hydropower task force recommendations will be revived. Senate Bill 11 was the governor's big resiliency bill. We're hoping that that's incorporated in a lame duck session in November of this year, but if not, it will be in next year. And then there's House Bill 5004, which was the big climate change bill, which failed to gain passage, which hoping for lame duck as well. That's all.
Great. One quick plug for SB 11, just building off your comments there, James, and just a big testament to the work of Joanna. You know, that bill has potential to be game changing in terms of enabling private investment in resilience improvements districts. So we're going to do what we can, Joanna, to support you and the governor as you build out that for next year. You know, just as we see things like CPACE being game changing, that bill has a very fundamental programmatic game changing capabilities for environmental infrastructure. So it's got great bones to it. That's it.
That's all I have for that. Thank you, everyone.
I just want to, just a quick thing. So, but we're still not going to deal with the climate crisis issues in the special session?
No.
Okay.
No. We
I
made
didn't think so, but you never know.
We made every effort to try and get Senate Bill 11 and elements of House Bill 5004 in it. We were told specifically, no, it's going to be a very narrow call dealing with the tax issue, the car tax issue. But Looney did open the door for a lame duck session in November after the elections.
Good. Okay. All right. Let's see, moving on to financing program updates and recommendations. It's Mackie and Elise, yes?
Yes, thank you. So this is Mackie Dykes. So as promised a board meeting or two ago, we are coming back for a tweak to the CPACE resilience guidelines. Just quick summary. 2 years ago, the General Assembly passed a law that expanded CPACE eligibility to include resiliency measures and exempted them from the savings to investment ratio requirement. So the savings from resiliency projects do not need to cover the cost. Elise Puzzelli did a great job of building out the programmatic framework for resiliency, which the board approved after public comment a meeting or two ago. We mentioned at the time that we had sort of last minute caught what we perceived to be a potential loophole around roofs. And as promised in that meeting, we wanted to close it, and that's what we're coming back here to do. Just a reminder, this whole discussion is from the perspective of our role as CPACE administrator. We serve two roles in the program. One is as administrator and another is as a lender. In the administrator role, we set the rules for all lenders that participate in the market. So none of this discussion will influence or sort of decide what our lending role for resiliency will be. We do expect to come back to the board later this year with a framework for how to think about resiliency lending ourselves. What the underwriting box should be, what sectors within the very broad definition of resiliency do we want to even play in, if any. So we don't anticipate doing any lending or developing projects till that's in place. However, as administrator, we do need to get these rules in place for the market. And again, we feel this is a necessary check to make sure that the program is structured in a way that we are getting public policy benefit. As Elise will get into, we're trying to close potential loopholes. So let me turn it over to you, Elise.
Great. Thank you, Mackie. Good morning, everybody. Elise Dizzelli on the financing programs team. So as Mackie mentioned, in March, you all approved the first iteration of the resilience guidelines for CPACE. So that was an update to the existing program guidelines, an update to the Appendix N, which is new construction, and a new edition of Appendix O, which are the resilience technical standards. So as Mackie mentioned, we kind of realized last minute that because we do a lot of projects that include roof upgrades, especially with solar PV projects or retrofit projects where we're doing financing for solar, we allow for roof upgrades to be included as a either as an energy measure. So if there's actual insulation or energy savings that'll be gained from the roof, we allow that as an energy measure. But we also allow it as a related measure to an energy improvement. That's something that's been allowed under our guidelines for a long time. So that's something certainly that a lot of borrowers take advantage of, especially when doing a rooftop solar PV project. They can use that as a related measure and roll it into the overall savings to investment ratio calculations. So as long as the roof costs are covered by the savings from the solar, they're allowed to include that in their financing. So when we included the resilience guidelines and we built those technical standards, we realized that it's possible that someone could come to us and ask if they could just do a standalone roof project as a resilience measure, which we agreed that could be something that we would be able to finance under the current definition. However, we thought that in the spirit of the program, we should probably put a few parameters around that. And luckily, the Fortified Standard program, which is an IBHS program, and I always forget the acronym, what the acronym means, but it's the Insurance Bureau. Can't remember the other two letters, but they run this program, Fortified, which is a resilience standard for both residential and commercial properties around resilience standards. So they have a particular standard that is just for roofs. So we included this new edit to say that if a borrower is looking to do a standalone roof project that wouldn't be considered under the standard SIR technical approach, that it would need to meet the fortified roof standards. So we put that into the guidelines and we put that out for public comment earlier in May. That closed about a week ago. We didn't receive any public comments on that. So we are coming to you for approval with the language that we included in the draft, which was in the memo that we sent around. So that's it. If anybody has any questions or comments.
I had a question about the resiliency portion of this. That if I had a building and it was near, let's say, you know, a running water like a stream or a small river or something, and I needed to build up a retaining wall because it tended to flood because of, you know, climate changes, more rain and et cetera, et cetera. Is that a resiliency project?
It could be. Sounds like that could be a flood management. That, you know, just as the example that you give sounds like it could be a flood management project. So under the resilience guidelines and well, under the statute and therefore under the guidelines, the requirements around the resilience avenue or pathway for CPACE is that a resilience study needs to be completed along with a cost savings analysis. So Mackie mentioned we don't have the SIR requirement, meaning you don't have to show a certain level of cost savings. However, an analysis needs to be done on that. So I think that would be a good example of something that that could be financed as a climate change adaptation measure.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I'm not a big fan of that, but okay. I mean, it doesn't save any energy. It's not I mean, it's like a whole different place that we're going to, but I guess we're going there.
Well, we certainly heard that sentiment in the last meeting. So, I wanted to draw the distinction. This doesn't require, nor do we plan at this point to use our money for any of this. We will come back to the board so we can engage y'all around that discussion to make sure as we think about on our financing program side where we're engaging with the market and trying to deploy our money, that we're doing it in areas that, that y'all want us to. That said, the legislature expanded the definition of CPACE. So in our role as the statutorily designated administrator, we do have to do what the legislature tells us to do and develop the programmatic framework for other lenders to do it. So that's what this is. And point well taken on, that you and perhaps others maybe don't want us in this space. So we're going to spend the next few months trying to come up with a framework and come back to you to have that discussion.
Just one other comment. Out of all the things that the legislature did not do to address climate change, they picked this. Thanks a lot. Okay.
I saw Matt Rinelli's hand up there.
Yeah, just thanks for coming back with this. I know we had a big discussion around it. Just John's question put a thought in my head, and maybe a note for as we get down the line. We should probably be careful in our literature or when we roll this out to be really clear that approval under this program does not negate the need for local and deep permits, because as we creep out into this broader universe of projects, it probably goes without saying, but I think we might want to just be clear. Deep does this all the time in their permits. They have a clause that just says that, and we probably want to just embed that somewhere in our literature. And then two, I don't know if we've thought about when's the right time for projects to come to us, before permitting or after permitting. Now's not the time to talk about it, but if we haven't thought about it, we should think about it. Like I know, for example, DOT, when you need, like a curb cut or any kind of permit from them, they're like, don't come to us until you have your local approvals in place, because they don't want to burn up a lot of staff time and administrative costs. So something to think about, again, as we venture out into this brave new world of projects. And maybe you've already thought about both of those things, but John's question made me think of that.
No, from a risk perspective for energy projects, we don't disperse. We approve a project, or you approve a project, but then we don't disperse any funds except in cases with a very experienced contractor that we've done work with in the past. We won't disperse funds prior to permits. so that we're protected and our borrowers protected from that standpoint. But you make a good point on, it does take a lot of work to get a project to you for approval. We don't want to waste our time doing that, and we don't know the space as well. So yeah, we'll take that point as we think about our framework.
Any more questions or comments? Okay, do I hear a motion to approve Resolution 4?
So moved, Matt.
Thank you, Matt. Do I hear a second?
Seconded, Hank.
Thank you, Hank. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? Okay. Thank you. Moving on. Incentive program updates and recommendations. And I think this is Sergio and Sarah.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Sergio Carrillo, Managing Director of Incentive Programs. Because this is likely the last meeting of the year for us for the incentive programs, we're not allowed to approve more incentives until next year. I invited my entire team, so you will see a few new faces. I just wanted you to see the people making the sausage. I'm gonna skip the introductions in the interest of time, but anyways, since the last deployment committee, we received a last batch of projects. These projects are smaller in size, under 500,000 individually, all of them. However, on the aggregate, they're more than $1 million. That's the reason we're here seeking approvals. So I'm going to turn it over to Sarah. She's going to make some remarks, and then Matt will cover some of the projects.
Thank you, Sergio. But maybe before we get into those details, we did just want to share a quick follow-up on an item that came up in the deployment committee meeting in May around fossil fuel generator removal. Just a quick heads up, we are working with the developers to identify which projects have on-site generators, if any, and once that's confirmed, we will provide an update to the board. So we are still working on that. And as Sergio mentioned, the projects that we're presenting today, they are smaller incentive amounts than what the board typically sees. And this just means that the projects are under the incentive amount of 500,000 individually. After the deployment committee approved 26 C&I projects on May 22nd, we thought that developers had given us all that they could at that time. And this is because of the deadline that Eric and Sergio mentioned. Kira had provided the ESS program with an upfront incentive deadline of June 15th per order 23 and docket 230805, which was provided to us on November 29th, 2023. So the upfront incentive deadline was to allow time for Kira to review the proposed C&I incentive levels, which were also due on the same date of June 15th. In an exciting development, though, developers did come to us with more potential energy projects that we received even after the deployment committee approvals. Our team quickly realized that additional time would be needed, so we reached out to Pura in order to secure a couple more days time. So we have an extension until June 24th. And we are going to share those projects with you in the next couple of slides. So over to you if you want to go through the C-Power project.
Thanks, Sarah. Thank you, Sergio. Hi, everybody. I'm Matt King, an associate here on the incentive programs team. I wanted to just give a quick warning before I get into the slides. I was notified there's fire alarm testing going on in my building this morning, so apologies if there's any noise disruption. The timing's just impeccable there. But let's get going. The first project here is developed by C-Power. This project will be in the town of Guilford at the Guilford Public High School. The high school was built in 2015, and they added a large solar array on the roof in 2018. That solar array is around 450 kilowatts in system power. The proposed project here is to add a single Tesla Megapack with 1,927 kilowatts in nameplate power and 3,584 kilowatt hours in energy capacity. This, as part of the agreement with C-Power will help to plan the project as well as help with development and installation. And then post-installation, C-Power will operate the battery to help provide various grid services to the customer, in addition to the incentive benefits from the Energy Storage Solutions Program. Next slide, please. To summarize the calculated incentives here for this project, they qualify for $481,750 in upfront incentives. As a reminder, upfront incentives are calculated as the energy capacity in kilowatt hours of the battery system times the applicable incentive rate. For this, incentive rates are generally determined based on the customer's annual peak demand. So for this project, they also were able to receive some additional incentive dollars through the priority customer adder due to the fact that this property is on a grid edge circuit. For those unfamiliar with the grid edge term, that's a utility classification for any circuits that are in the highest 10% in length of electrical outages or frequency of outages. In addition to the upfront incentive, this project is estimated to receive around $1.3 million in performance incentives over the 10-year period of participation in the program. Just with this estimated performance incentive and the upfront incentive here, so in incentives alone, they are able to just about pay back the cost of the battery system. I'm not sure if Sarah mentioned this earlier, but this project, as well as the other projects we'll be presenting today, all have an estimated completion date of 2027. And this is due to a few factors, but mainly that there's a large interconnection queue with the state utilities. All right. And with that, I present resolution number 5.
I just have a comment on this. I hope that please that the Green Bank, along with the school, uses this as the educational opportunity for the students, not just as improvement of their their systems or whatever, but that it's like we tell the students about it, that we're cutting carbon and saving energy, so that kids know about this. I think it's so important, that aspect of it. Thanks.
I think this is Lonnie. Senator Christine Cohen lives in Guilford. Matt Hoey, the first selectman, I think they're all on top of this, and it's I think this is a town where the kids really are up to speed on a lot of these things and push some of these agendae, quite frankly. So good observation, John. Do I hear any more questions or comments on resolution 5? Concerns? Do I hear a motion to approve resolution 5?
So moved. John Hardy.
Do we hear a second?
Seconded, Kim Morse.
Wait, so second would be, say again?
Kim Morse.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Abstaining? Okay. Let's see. So we're moving on to investment updates and recommendations. So this is Bert Hunter and Fiona.
Madam Chair, we have one more
Oh.
batch of incentive programs, scale microgrid.
Okay. I just
Sarah and Matt. Is it Matt?
Yeah,
Matt's going to talk about that.
Thank you.
Okay, good.
Thanks, Ryan. The second batch here is a group of 5 new projects developed by Scale Microgrids. This first project is located in Windsor, Connecticut. The proposed system is consists of 4 Tesla megapacks. I do want to note that in aggregate, the system size is 7,708 kilowatts in nameplate power and 15,416 kilowatt hours in energy capacity. But these projects have applied as 4 individual projects due to the fact that each of the batteries will be separately metered and have their own unique utility account number. This system is located at a large warehouse in Windsor owned by Winstanley Enterprises. And the current tenant at the warehouse is an Amazon fulfillment center. Winstanley Enterprises acquired this property in 2023. And as part of their redevelopment plan for the site, have decided to opt for battery energy storage and are fortunately doing so through our program, which is exciting. It's always great to see large sites like this with big name brands taking part in this program. And the second property here is also developed by Scale and another warehouse owned by Winstanley Enterprises. This is in Windsor Locks, Connecticut, and on site they plan to install a single Tesla Megapack. The current tenant at this site is C&S Wholesale Grocers. C&S are a national grocery supplier and supply chain specialist. They work with multiple privately owned grocers around the country, as well as some larger chain grocery stores. And similar to the previous project, as well as the Guilford High School project, Scale will help to design the system and install it, and also operate the battery post-installation to provide grid services, and also operate the battery during the dispatching events through the 10-year program period. In terms of calculated incentives for these projects, you'll notice that 4 of the 5 projects here each qualify for $385,400 in upfront incentives. One of the 5 projects, ESS 1045, which is the 4th line, has a slightly increased incentive amount. That's because that particular project has a lower annual peak demand, and they qualify for the slightly higher medium commercial incentive rate. So that's the reason why there's a bit of a change there in upfront incentives. Each of these projects are estimated to receive roughly $1.3 million in performance incentives over the 10-year period, and none of them qualify for any priority customer adders.
Okay, any questions or observations?
Madam Chair, I'm going to abstain. We represent Winstanley, not really on these energy projects, but just, in full disclosure.
Yeah. Aren't they out of Boston?
Yes, but they have a pretty big Connecticut footprint.
It's huge. I mean,
Yeah.
they're all over pharmaceuticals as well. They're impressive. Okay. Do I hear a motion to approve Resolution 6?
So moved, John Hardy.
Do I hear a second?
Second, Hank Webster.
Thank you, Hank. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Abstaining? Okay, thank you. Now we're moving on to investment updates and recommendations, and Bert and Fiona.
Great. In the interest of time, Madam Chair, I'll be doing these without Fiona today. So we have a couple of transactions that are related to our Smart E program. One is talk about linked deposits, the other Capital for Change, then their financing facility, which is being shifted over to new lenders. And then we have a Green Liberty Notes extension, which David Beach will go through after I'm finished with the first 2. So I don't see a slide. Maybe that's because of my phone. Is the Smarty loan, single family unsecured loan, slide 33 up?
That's correct, Bree.
Okay, great. All right. So this is just for the benefit of some of the directors, and I'm going to try to move this along because we're a little bit behind. The Smarty loan is our flagship residential clean energy program, loan program, and it celebrated 10 years of operation last summer. It funds a variety of clean energy measures, everything from energy efficiency, solar PV, battery storage, the EV chargers, heat pumps, Energy Star appliances, everything. It also allows for a portion of the loan, I believe it's 25%, to cover project adjacent activities. So if you have asbestos in your basement and you're switching out your heating system, you can use it for that. You can use it for tree removal if you're putting up solar and it's blocking your roof, that kind of thing. It comes with affordable rates. We'll talk about that in a moment. And there's no contractor fee, which can be very burdensome on smaller contractors, independent contractors, to get financing. It's very successful, over 130 million of approved loans over 11 years. And we provide a loan loss reserve in exchange for not to exceed rates. So the lenders have to agree to be below the rates that are in the program, and we will cover the second loss after they absorb a first loss limit of generally 1.5% on most of their portfolio. This resulted in very low losses for the Green Bank, while providing access to affordable capital for Connecticut residents. So next slide, please. So on this slide, you see a picture of one of America's most wanted public officials, depending upon what side of the interest rate picture you're on. If you're investing in treasuries and you like that interest, you think this is the greatest guy in the last 5 years. If you're a small business borrowing at prime, yeah, he's probably not your best friend. But he's committed to getting inflation down, and that has led to higher interest rates, which have really stressed a number of our community lenders. We did do a rate increase a bit back in September 23. We'll cover that in the next slide, but not yet. And this has led to a concern about their net interest margin. So, they take in deposits from the public and they put out loans at a particular interest rate. And depending upon the relationship between the two, that spread can compress. There's some shifting of papers around by someone in the background. If you could go on mute, please. There's a lot of paper shuffling. Thank you. The deployment committee approved this last year, this linked deposits program. And how this works is the Green Bank will place a deposit with the financial institution at an agreed concessional rate, meaning we generally, with our excess deposits, we put those on deposit with the Connecticut Treasurer's short-term investment fund called the STIF, and it pays a very attractive rate. Currently, it's around 5.4%. But in order to help this lender in the pilot program, we have agreed to place a deposit at a rate that is 300 basis points below their portfolio rate of loans that they bring on board. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see the range of interest rates, and you'll see, for example, let's just focus on the 10-year rate, which was 5.99 for most of the program for 10 years. And then we had to raise it in September. So that's gone up to 6.99. And our arrangement under this pilot is we'll deposit with them for a rate at 300 basis points below what they bring their incremental loans on for. So let's just assume, because it's the most popular one, the 10-year is 6.99. That means that we will deposit with the relevant institution at 3.99%. So that gives the institution a 300 basis point margin, and our cost, if we can go to the next slide, our cost, if you see staff proposal there, is about 66,000 for the next fiscal year. In the current fiscal year, it's $47,000. That cost represents an opportunity cost versus what we could earn in our STIF account for the same deposit. We really want to continue this pilot, as does the lender in question, which is Mutual Security, one of our largest lenders in the Smarty program. We have, as Eric mentioned earlier in the presentation, in the budget presentation, Capital for Change, which will be on a subject of our discussion next, has been without incremental funding for the program since the end of last year and has had to pause on lending into the program. That's caused some minor disruptions that we've been able to deal with thus far, but as the incentives that come raining down from Washington from the Inflation Reduction Act take full force, we need all of our lenders to be active, present, and part of this program. So we're recommending that we continue this pilot, as well as increase it from $2.5 million, which the deployment committee approved in May as a stopgap measure, because we were at a $2 million cap and we just breached it with the last advance that the lender requested. So we're going to go to 3.5 million as the request, move the pilot to extend until June 30th of 2025. And with any luck, Chair Powell and his fellow directors at the Fed will start to decrease interest rates by the end of the year and continue that path in 2025 so that we can discontinue the pilot. That's where we are today, which brings us to Resolution 7. Any questions?
Questions? And thank you, board members, for hanging in there. I know some people have hard stops, but we'll move along quickly now. Do I hear a motion to approve Resolution 7?
So moved,
So-
Matt.
Matt, thank you. And second?
I'll
Second, Hank.
second Adrian speaking.
Great, thank you. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Abstaining? Okay. Great, thank you.
Great, wonderful. That brings us to item 7B, which is, I'll move it along, Chair Reed. The Smarty Loan Capital for Change item. If you go to slide 39, which has a summary, which is the overview slide. So you'll see on this slide a progression of financing facilities that the Green Bank has helped Capital for Change put in to finance their Smart E-Loan program. So Capital for Change is a community development financial institution. These are institutions that are specially chartered by the federal government to focus on low income and disadvantaged communities. 60% of their activities by regulation must be focused on that cohort. This particular CDFI, there are some CDFIs that are banks and depository institutions. For example, Nutmeg Federal Credit Union is a CDFI, but Capital for Change is not a depository institution. Therefore, when they do loans, whether it's for multifamily or in this case residential loans, they need to raise that from their equity that they have on their balance sheet, plus what they can't cover with that, which is the lion's share, they need to get from private lenders. So they have financing arrangements with a number of financial institutions. However, we've been able to get them really good terms from lenders as well as capital over the years because we're participating as a subordinated lender, and that gives the other lenders comfort in the overall facility. So you'll see the original where we started off by arranging a $27 million facility with Amalgamated Bank. We held a 20% share of that financing at 4.5 million. And that was a floating rate facility. So that was back up almost 5 years ago. It's amazing how long these programs have sustained themselves. Then with the interest rate increases that we just discussed, we proactively approached C4C as well as Amalgamated to say, we really need to try to fix the interest rate on this facility, which we did, and the board approved in October of 2020. And that was put in place in December of 2022 to do a $25 million facility, so slightly less, but a fixed rate, so which is really meaningful for Capital for Change. They needed some additional capital in October of 23. We came along to the board and asked if we could top up to be even with Amalgamated. The board approved that in last October. But that was the end of Amalgamated's ability to participate. They just, from a allocation point of view, they said that they couldn't go beyond the 15 million, given all that was going on in the market. So that kind of set us with Capital for Change looking for alternatives. We discussed with Webster Bank, who holds their operating accounts, and M&T Bank, who has been interested in increasing their level of activity with Capital for Change. And what we've come up with is the proposed box, which has the Green Bank providing an additional $10 million. So we're fully drawn on our 15 million. Again, this is backstopped by the loans the Smart E loans, which are quite low risk. So we would advance an additional $10 million over time over the next, say, 2 years. And Webster and M&T would advance an additional $15 million to our 10. So the overall balance would be for us to put up about 45% of the facility, so slightly less than the 50% that we're doing right now. We would do it at the same 4% interest rate. Webster and M&T, they would do it at a fixed rate. Also, actually, it's term SOFR plus 1%, which in the current market is 6.3%. So it's with that rate kind of topping out, that's really a good margin, not too much higher than where Amalgamated is today, for an overall rate of 5.25% in today's market, which everyone is really seeing as being the peak by most analysts. So that, I think we really need to put this, if you go to the next slide, it just shows you the overall structure of the facility for Smart E. I won't dwell on that. I mentioned about the loan loss reserves that are provided. Let's go to the next slide. You'll see the number of lenders that we have in the program. You will also notice that this is a current slide on the website. So you'll see that Capital for Change is not listed. We need to get them back on the list so we can round out our lenders. And so if you go to the next slide, it's just really the summary that we've been discussing. So would appreciate approval by the board. This is really good to see Webster and M&T stepping up and providing this capital. This provides capital that will last into 2026, and at the same time, the Green Bank will be working with Capital for Change on a capital market solution to take pools of these loans out so that we can find a more permanent solution for funding of these loans as they move forward, and keep them a healthy partner in this marketplace. So with that, I'll stop and take any questions.
Okay, I'm hearing no questions or observations. Do I hear a motion to approve Resolution 8?
Motion.
Do I hear a second?
Second, John Hardy.
Thanks, John. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Abstaining? Okay, great.
Okay, thanks very much. So we're going to move on to the Green Liberty Notes extension, and although we have a lot to report here, David, thanks for covering this, but I'm going to ask you to be really speedy on this. This is a very, very successful program, and David will recap it. But we do need to move things along for the benefit of the board and get to some other items on the agenda. Thank you.
I'll go real fast. Program was originally approved in 2021, ended it last year at this June meeting for an additional year. We expanded the size. We'll go on the next slide and move right through. So we've now done 10 successful issuances, including consecutive sellouts. If you want to look more in depth in this chart, we continue to see a strong spread between price at which we are purchasing the SBA loans, which are supporting this program, and the interest rate that we are providing to investors. So that spread is usually above 1, and that's been really strong. Go on to the next slide. This is a bit of fun news. Earlier this month, I had a chance to go to the Clean Energy States Alliance Summit in Chicago, where this program actually received a State Leadership in Clean Energy Award, called a SLICE Award. The photo on the screen is not the official photo. CISA was originally planning to publicly announce earlier this month. They haven't yet. They're trying to get, I think, webinars all set up for the awardees. So the official photo with me and some of the CISA staff is not available yet. So I took this in the office with the plaque so you can see it. Just wanted to highlight the judges quote here, which I thought was really great. And they have an independent group of 5 judges. It's not CISA staff. They said, the Connecticut Green Bank's Green Liberty Note program is innovative and opens the rewards of the clean energy economy to a new community, extending the benefits so everyone can participate. The threshold to entry is low and the return on investment is good. Other states could adopt this highly replicable and cost-effective program. So great kind of appreciation full group here. Go on to the next slide. Won't highlight much. We're continuing to get new investors. We're still hitting a lot of Connecticut investors, still hitting a lot of those investments of under $1,000, and the repayment process is going well. We've now had some people who have reinvested twice, so people are starting to take advantage of compound interest. So that's really exciting. The last slide just kind of talks about what we're requesting. We just want another year, 4 more issuances at $350,000. I'll take any questions if they have any, but otherwise, that's it for me.
I do also want to point out that we have investors in about 40 different states, which is amazing. And I think that SLICE Award puts us in the Boston Red Sox category of like pennants. You just keep racking them up. So good to see.
Congratulations. It's one of the marketing opportunities. We have people really understand Liberty bonds and Liberty. I mean, that's something that people can really, wrap their brains around. Okay. Do I hear a motion to approve Resolution 9?
Lonnie, I just have one quick question before.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Matt.
That's all right. It's great. I just remember what this program used to pay for capital, and this is so much better. So good job. But in the resolution, there's a sentence that says the bond shall be issued by a subsidiary of CFO Holdings, shall be issued for the sole purpose of the subsidiary, and shall not be issued by or on behalf of the Green Bank. Could you give me like a quick explanation of what that means?
Yeah. So if these were issued officially by the Green Bank, we would not be able to issue crowdfunding securities. If there's any sort of guarantee, or if these are actually issued by the parent entity, we would be in the municipal bond market. And so we would be stuck with all those requirements, and we wouldn't be able to get those $100 investments that we're able to get with crowdfunding. So that's why we have to issue through a subsidiary, and the Green Bank isn't able to provide a formal guarantee of this program to meet the legal exemptions.
Okay, so we can vote on it as the Green Bank and push it down to a subsidiary, and that makes it fine, essentially. Okay,
Yes.
All right, thanks.
No problem.
Any more questions? Okay, do I hear a motion to approve Resolution 9?
So moved, Matt.
Thanks, Matt. Do we hear a second?
Seconded, Hank.
Thank you, Hank. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Abstaining? Okay, thank you, everybody. I think we have other business. We're going to talk about the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. And Brian, is that you?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Reed. We've got one more investment update and recommendation, which is Green Bank Capital Solutions. And we'll have Lee do that before I do the GGRF.
Oh, wait, I just saw that. Sorry. Go ahead. Hi, Lee.
Hi, thank you, Chair Reed. And with some backup and support from the investments team, Larry Campana, we're excited to talk to you folks today about the expansion of Capital Solutions open rolling RFP process. Next slide. So just to orient this, in Public Act 21115, so we're all fresh, the Act's passage in June of 2021 enabled a new phase of the Connecticut Green Bank's efforts to carry out our mission. It signaled a broadened scope and deepened commitment to environmental infrastructure in addition to our focus on clean energy. And this legislation has provided us a framework to be innovative and mobilize investment in projects that confront climate change by addressing the urgent need for environmental infrastructure as defined on the slide here. Quite broad, you might notice. Next slide. As we work to develop financing products and programs for environmental infrastructure, our strategy 123 is effectively look at those areas where we can expand program offerings that exist here at the Green Banks, much like SMART-E now extending into resilience measures, or CPACE, as we've discussed, whether from a permit program administrator or lender perspective. So number two of our strategy, pursue bespoke opportunities through Green Bank Capital Solutions, open rolling RFP, which is what we're bringing to you today. And then number three, based on the activities and the learnings and the partnerships and where we really see the greatest opportunities within the market, to build from there into more longer term and strategic program design opportunities, as we've been talking about the potential for resilience improvement districts, much like if we're able to, let's say, reintroduce aspects of Senate Bill 11, the Governor's Resilience Bill. Next slide. For projects that do not meet programmatic criteria, Green Bank Capital Solutions was approved by this board of directors to allow for the review, competitive selection, and award through an open RFP process. It allows us to receive requests from the market to finance projects within the scope of our comprehensive plan. Prior investments you may be familiar with include Butterfly and Posigen. And an expansion of this open rolling RFP process from clean energy to also include environmental infrastructure is a really important next step in our expanded authority as per Public Act 21115. Simply put, the broad applicability of the Capital Solutions open rolling RFP process makes it an ideal tool to help us implement against the very broad needs and opportunities associated with our expanded mission. This request is also being brought in support of our approved FY24 comprehensive plan target to launch or expand existing financing products for clean energy to include support for environmental infrastructure. Next slide. Oh, I'm jumping to the resolution. I did want to provide just two very quick examples of how we might think about the use of or the potential projects that might come through the hopper. So you can imagine, for example, a prior investment that the Green Bank made into quantum biopower and the potential for future consideration of helping quantum expand their ability to receive more municipally generated food waste. So this would fall very squarely under the environmental infrastructure interest in waste and recycling, for example. Another related to our expanded mission for parks and recreation, equity, and actually this project has a little bit of everything, but thinking about a park group here in Hartford, I was out on their trails on the river this morning, where it's the development of a 60-acre riverfront community park. Capitalization to get the park developed would be somewhere in the ballpark of $25 to $50 million. And it has elements of wetland enhancement, brownfield remediation. It creates connectivity to a regional trail system, completing a 7-mile river walk from South Windsor to South Hartford with complementary commercial development as a potential source of revenue. So that brings us to the resolution, and happy to entertain any questions or discussion in advance of Chair Reed bringing the resolution.
Any questions, observations, concerns? Okay, do I hear a motion to approve Resolution 10?
So moved. This is Kim.
Oh, thanks, Kim. Do you hear a second?
This is Dominic, second.
Thank you, Dominic.
We do have a question from Adrian.
Oh, from Adrienne. Okay, Adrienne?
Hi, I just wanted to know what relationship this has to resiliency hubs, because we discussed them under other chapters, I think, today.
Lee?
I would imagine that a resilience hub, whether for the energy benefits or for the more ecological components, could be considered through capital solutions, considering it's both for clean energy and environmental infrastructure.
I mean, I think that's a great point, Adrian. I mean, from most of my thinking through now and most of our discussions with resilience hubs through now have been more on the energy resilience side, and those would flow through our existing capital solutions RFP. But with this expansion would allow us to do more and address different types of resilience.
Yeah, I think it would depend on the resilience hub project, but the flexible open rolling RFP for clean energy and environmental infrastructure should be a broad enough offering to encompass multiple aspects of a project coming through.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? All right, so let me just go through the motion again. So who, our motion to approve is?
Well, I'll approve the motion.
I
believe I made
a motion to approve, and the second was?
I seconded it. This is Dominic.
Oh, Dominic. Okay, great. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Oh, good. Opposed? Abstaining? Okay, good. Excellent.
Right.
Oh, now
Well,
Brian, I think other business.
There we go. Well, thank you all for your patience and support for all those items that we just worked through today. Well, we're finally here. We've had several conversations over the course of the last year in terms of how the Green Bank is dealing with the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. Today, we're going to talk about one aspect of it and bring forward a proposal to engage with the Coalition for Green Capital for $94 million for our portion of the National Clean Investment Fund. But I wanted to start off with recognizing our new Associate Director of the GGRF, Stephanie Cohane. Stephanie joins us from Pura and Deep, and I could tell you she's jumped right in with the staff and team as we work to put together the plan and work to put together the legal documents as we address the opportunities for both the National Clean Investment Fund and Solar for All. So a big shout out, a big welcome to Stephanie. So before I go into some details on the NCIF award, let me just step back again and give a high-level overview of the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. This is a $27 billion source of funding through the Inflation Reduction Act that includes three elements. One is a $7 billion Solar for All competition. The EPA has awarded 60 awards, including to Connecticut's Department of Energy and Environmental Protection for Project Sunbridge. Commissioner Dykes and her team ran a fantastic proposal that included the Department of Housing, the Connecticut Housing Finance Authority, the Public Utilities Regulatory Authority, and the Green Bank. We've got a $62.5 million proposal that we are now working on the terms and conditions with the EPA to close on that source of funding. Solar for All is intended to enable low-income and disadvantaged communities to have access to solar and storage and other enabling upgrades. So our teams are working really, really hard to pull together the pieces for that program. The second part of the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund is something called the Clean Communities Investment Accelerator. This is a $6 billion source of funding. The EPA has awarded it to 5 nonprofits who are going to provide essentially $10 million capitalization grants, or up to $10 million of capitalization grants, and $1 million of technical assistance for community lenders. You could think of community lenders like what Bert was talking about with our Smart E-Loan program, Capital for Change, which is a community development financial institution, the Nutmeg Credit Union, which is a credit union. Think of community lenders as that. Our focus is going to be to try to enable as much of the $6 billion that's going to those 5 nonprofits to come to Connecticut's community lenders to support our infrastructure, our ecosystem of local lenders. And then lastly is the about $14 billion of the National Clean Investment Fund, which the EPA has awarded to 3 nonprofits, including a former board member of the Connecticut Green Bank in Reed Hunt. For all of you who might recall, I'm sure Chair Reed certainly recalls, as a part of Public Act 1180, we had Section 99, which created the Connecticut Green Bank. The Coalition for Green Capital was working actively during that 2011 legislative session to effectively create the nation's first state-level green bank, working through the Office of the Governor, working with Commissioner Dan Estey of the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, which at the time was just the DEP, not the DEEP, as well as the leadership of the Energy and Technology Committee, which includes Chair Reed, as well as our former Mayor Laura Hoydick from Stratford. Reed's vision at the time was to create green banks at the local level that would ultimately lead to the creation of a national climate bank. And within the Inflation Reduction Act was this $14 billion. So CGC competed for those resources and won a $5 billion award to administer a national climate bank. Essentially, over the next couple of years, their focus is to, as we have done, to use limited public resources to mobilize multiples of private. So to use the $5 billion to get $40 to $60 billion in private investment to try to get a 10 to 15 times mobilization ratio over a 7-year period. So that will include securitizations. It will include senior subordinated structures like Bert just talked about with Capital for Change. While targeting no less than 55% of that investment in low-income and disadvantaged communities to avoid a lot of greenhouse gas emissions. Within that, their original proposal was $10 billion. They received a 50% award at $5 billion. Within that proposal were 18 subawardees. You could think of them as green banks across the country, from the California Infrastructure Bank, the New York Green Bank, New Jersey Green Bank, to other green banks such as the Connecticut Green Bank. So the way the Coalition for Green Capital allocated resources to green banks was to look at their population based on the Climate and Economic Justice Screening Tool and proportionately allocate those numbers to states so that we would get an equitable allocation. So our allocation underneath the proposal is about $41 million. We have also along the way been a voice and a champion for other green banks who want to get up and started. One of the things that Bert, myself, the team have been engaged in over the last decade is advising and providing feedback and confidence to a number of states as they create their green banks. We've got the Puerto Rico Green Energy Trust, which Sergio sits on the board of directors for, essentially their green bank, and the New Hampshire Community Loan Fund, which is a CDFI that are seeking our oversight and support through that source of funding from CGC. So we would effectively serve three different states. The last thing I would say here is that currently there is a disputer in the greenhouse gas reduction fund process. That means there was an applicant who wasn't selected with an award who is disputing their determination by the EPA. The EPA, as a result, has essentially told the awardees under both competitions that they're going to work to obligate 50% of the funds until the dispute is resolved. So this disputer is working through a process now with the EPA to try to get a different decision. I could say, based on the things that I've been reading and knowing the level of rigor that's gone into CGC's proposal for the NCIF, that CGC score is really high. It will be very difficult to kind of overcome that. But nonetheless, the EPA is working through a process. As Eric laid out in the budget earlier on, he talked about targets, talked about expenditures of greenhouse gas reduction funds. These are the different areas that we're looking to support. The EPA has identified 3 priority funding areas that are pretty typical of the sorts of things that we do: green school buildings, green municipal and commercial buildings, green homes. You could think of solar and storage, bringing resilience to them based on the conversation we just had from Adrian's question. That can also bring environmental infrastructure improvements to resilience hubs as well. But areas that we really want to dig into are green school buses, as well as environmental infrastructure. When the governor's bill, Public Act 21-115, that created environmental infrastructure passed, one of the things that we ensured was in the bill was that there were going to be no Connecticut taxpayer dollars, but we were going to compete and win for federal resources. And knock on wood, this is our source of competition and going to be our source of funding to get us off and launched. But you could see how we look to invest the funds, how we look to target Justice 40 communities that are consistent with our vulnerable communities definition and the mobilization ratio we expect. This is the timeline that we're looking at over the coming months. Right now, the EPA is working on terms and conditions. This is a really extensive document. Brian Farnan, Alex Kovtunenko have been great helping us think through how all these terms and conditions, which are going to flow down through the awardee, which is the Coalition for Green Capital, and then flow down from them to us as a sub-grantee through our contract. So we're going to have to abide by these terms and conditions, which means things like Davis-Bacon, Build America, Buy America, National Historic Preservation. The sub-awardee agreements we're expecting from CGC shortly. Those are documents that, after today's board recommendation and hopeful approval, we will be able to engage in that contract with CGC to enable that $94 million to flow. I wanted to note that dispute is the other highlighted area here in that first column that's currently working its way through the system. But ultimately, there's a deadline per the Inflation Reduction Act of September 30th of 2024 that all $27 billion in those 3 buckets has to be obligated by that date. If it's not obligated by that date, the statute becomes moot. So there's a lot of effort focused right now on getting all the contracts in place and the money moving through different accounts so that the investment can happen in this. And I guess I would just say, lastly, coming back to the foundation of the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, there are 3 objectives. which I would argue are 100% consistent with the green bank model we have created here in Connecticut. The first is that the proceeds will be used to invest in projects that reduce greenhouse gas emissions and air pollution. The second objective being that those projects should benefit American communities, but specifically low-income and disadvantaged communities. And the third is that the use of those proceeds should mobilize private investment in more of those projects. So that's very much what we have built ourselves on. That's why I would argue, as I'm sure many on our team would, and many out there across the country would say, that the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund is based on the model that Connecticut created back in 2011. So let me stop there and see if I could take any questions.
This is Dominic. First, again, congratulations to the team and everybody that worked on these proposals. It's really exciting recognition and a quantum leap forward for the Green Bank, I think. I wanted to ask about your view, and I'm not as up to speed on the details on this, but I was at a conference last week in New York that was attended by a bunch of folks from Coalition for Green Capital and other folks in the GGRF space. And the discussion inevitably came up, as it does with a lot of these grant programs that are being sort of pushed out the door. You know, how insulated are they against potential future changes in Congress or in the White House in terms of, you know, the deadline is to obligate funds, but is there any ability to claw back things even once they've been obligated? Has there been discussion around sort of making sure that they're, you know, there's a waiver for getting things on the balance sheets of either the awardees or the sub awardees, or I don't know if you could just comment on that.
It's a great question, because one of the foundational objectives is the third one that I spoke to, which is to unlock and mobilize private investment. And the challenge that one of the outstanding terms that the awardees for the NCIF and the CCIA are working through has to do with payments. So specifically to your point, Dominic, currently the way the payment system would work is that Treasury would deposit the amount of funding into an ASAP account, which is an automated, standard account payable app where you would expend funds and then withdraw funds from that account. To your point on making that system resilient to potentially future changes in political leadership, the EPA is working with the awardees on a term now that would effectively create a fiscal agent, very similar to what happened with the Paycheck Protection Program, where Treasury provided capital to financial institutions. So in this case, you could see the EPA issuing a request for proposals to identify a large financial institution, such as the Bank of New York, the Bank of America, whatever, that would receive these funds from Treasury on behalf of the goals and objectives established by the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, that would effectively then connect those banks to the awardees and have that capital serve as balance sheet capital instead of an expense reimbursement system, so that they can actually leverage it as part of their balance sheet to mobilize private capital, but also, to your point, to essentially create more resilience from a change in administration to pull those funds back. That's what they're working on. In the timeline that we noted, that's one of the terms specifically that they hope to get in place by October of this year. Good question.
Great, thanks.
This is Lonnie. I just want to remark that I think the name of that company that's suing is Equality, which is a coalition of credit unions who say they need to get into the green bank game. And I'm thinking, don't we have credit unions in our green bank game? And we have Nutmeg Credit Union. And I mean, it just feels that that's an effort where we could help with the.
Yeah, we actually have a credit union league of Connecticut, which is overseen by Bruce Adams, and he's been great. You know, to the extent we can find opportunities under the Clean Communities Investment Accelerator to attract capital from Inclusive. Inclusive is the Association of Credit Unions that competed and won $1.8 billion. We want to get some of that capital into Connecticut, but this is a party that's disputing the EPA's decisions on the winners. So we'll see how that process unfolds. But you can believe that we're following it and we're doing what we can to ensure that the resources come to Connecticut as we've earned them.
Yeah, I was going to say they're out of Texas, just saying. Okay, do we have any questions or observations about Resolution 11? Do I hear a motion to approve?
This is
So moved,
Dominic, so
Matt.
move.
I'll second.
Okay, Dominic, Matt seconding. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? Wow. Thank you, everybody, for hanging in there. There was a lot, but this has been such a successful year. Congratulations to the team for all your work, and to the subcommittees for also jumping in along the way to really examine these, all these. Is there a little, I thought there was a disappearing
just me
yellow
clapping.
hand.
It was just me clapping, Lonnie.
Oh, is that what that was? Just a sad little orange hand. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for the applause for everybody. So do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Hi.
Aye.
Aye.
Have a great weekend, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye all.
Nice to meet you all.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Welcome,
Nice to meet you,
Kim.
Kim.